Welcome to the stream today. This is Designing Adobe XD. I'm your host, Talin Wadsworth. I'm the lead designer for Adobe XD. And today, this is monumental because I believe, Peter, you are the first engineer that has agreed to come on the stream with me.
I can't believe I'm the first one. That's crazy to me.
That's pretty crazy. I was thinking about that. I was like, wait a sec, because I have tried before. And I just ended up sort of leaning on the designers way too much.
Yeah, we got to get more of us on.
But yeah, seriously, I am super excited to have you. Everyone, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll kick things off here.
Yeah, so I'm Peter Flynn. I've been an engineer on XD since almost the beginning of XD. I feel really blessed to have been part of it since early on. And the past year or so, I've been working on extensibility in XD. So all the public APIs that we announced at Adobe Max, I guess a little less than a month ago now?
Yeah,
3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I worked heavily on that with a whole bunch of teams of really great people, and we're here to show off some of that and work on it today.
You know, like Peter, this has been a passion project for you in particular, and it was one of the things that we as an XD team set out like as a thing we knew we wanted to go do, and to see it happen, to see it come out, it's so exciting. Let's say hey to everybody in the chat today. How's everybody doing? You see some familiar faces, names, avatars and names in the chat today. Anel, how's it going? Cameron, Afroha, Ahmad, Munir's here, Douchey Rocks, Vanessa, how's everybody doing? Are you guys excited to talk about plugins? Do you know what plugins are? Have you been using plugins in XD?
This is so cool, by the way. I've never done a live stream before, so seeing the stream, like that's wow.
This is one of the last streams. What, a couple more weeks for the new studio? Yeah. A couple more weeks. So
it'll look the same.
It'll look the same to everyone else, but this is a really amazing setup. It's sort of meta. Look, there's Carrie. Carrie as well, a member of the plugins team. Another here on the chat. Carrie, it's great to see you. If you guys have questions, while Peter and we're going to be doing something really cool today. But with pros like Carrie in the stream here, be happy to answer questions as well. But today, again, we talk about plugins. Plugins are amazing in XD. And today we are going to make a plugin from scratch, kind of a step-by-step process. And so if you guys are tuning in and you're interested in making plugins, this is gonna be a huge resource for you. And we're really excited. And again, I think it's really a testament to, again, not just the tool of XD, but how we've built the process, like to make plugins as easy as possible. To create for
and this was like super important to us. Like we were on a mission when we started planning this to make writing a plugin in XD as easy as possible, as low friction, low barrier to entry. You can get started quickly. The APIs are supposed to be really easy. We wanted really great documentation that's easily accessible online. So we invested a lot in, it wasn't enough to just make it possible to write a plugin. We wanted right out the gate to make it as smooth as we possibly could. And I think it's really exciting to me to get to show people how smooth that process is.
Again, if you haven't used plugins, I think plugins are so valuable because we have amazing designers and developers and product managers like on XD, and researchers and QE, and but there's only of course so much that we can do, right? And there's of course things that maybe fall outside of what you would normally find in XD or we plan on doing. And this is where plugins really shine is, maybe I have a process, I'm working with the service, like the tool that I use that is not XD, and I need to sort of make these two worlds meet together to help, smooth out my process, or I, want to do some crazy drawing vector thing on Canvas. Right,
there's so many cool use cases. I mean, just all these categories of you could have some crazy business process you need to integrate with. You could have some really specific set of export naming conventions that you just want to automate. You've got content generation. If you're trying to bring in dummy data or any kind of layout structuring that you have like templates for, you can automate all that kind of stuff with extensibility. You can all kinds of crazy export formats like code generation, right? Generating HTML, CSS, React code, whatever platform you're working on, you can write a plugin to generate that stuff for you. And then just like shortcuts to work with your content, right? If you've got
simple things.
So hopefully we'll talk about a bunch of these.
There's a huge spectrum, and I see some people here in the chat that've tried out some plugins. Anel was mentioning even the integrations with Slack, again, another way that you can extend the use of XD and work with the other tools that you use to get your job done.
Service integrations.
Have you any early favorites out there in the chat? Let us know. Because we'd love to see it again. I feel like I go in there every day and there's a new one. So let's actually go look at that. Let's actually go here to my screen And let's just kind of introduce plugins again. And again, I was excited to give everybody a little preview on the stream before Max. And of course, I've talked about it on every stream since then, because it really has been such a huge part of my daily workflow, and it just like seamlessly fit in. Again, not only did Peter and the team think about how developers would create plugins and share them, or anyone really, that doesn't have to be a developer, but we really thought about the experience. How do we, again, make it easy to use, and then easy, both from a developer standpoint, easy to get in and create something, but also easy to interact with and install and experiment with, inside of the tool.
Right.
And
so a technical side of that, since I can be here to talk the nerd stuff, right? Like one of the other things that that's kind of behind the scenes, but we really invested a lot of energy into, was making sure that as much as we possibly could, plugins that might have bugs in them or be written hastily or not tested that well or whatever, because a lot of plugins are not written necessarily by a commercial enterprise with a full-time QE team and all that. They might be written by someone in their spare time, and you just want to share it to the world because you think it might help people.
Yeah.
And so plugins might have bugs in them and that sort of stuff, and we worked super hard to make sure that everything behind the scenes, everything underneath the plugin API that the plugin is calling, we wanted to make sure that it's not going to crash XD, corrupt your document, make XD run slow, all that sort of stuff. So we've worked really hard to make it feel like, as a user of XD, you can dabble in and experiment with trying out different plugins, and you're not taking huge risks. They install really quickly, they uninstall quickly. You don't have to restart XD even, it's just all instant, one click. And that was a big thing we wanted to accomplish.
I think it's a huge achievement, really. Again, because we want to ensure that, that you don't get sidetracked. Because anytime you have to spend sort of, recreating or remaking things that had crashed, that's time, and then that drops lags your process, and now you've got to play some catch up. We see some early votes on UI faces. I think is a great one.
It's a cool one, yeah.
UI faces is a great one. Content generator is a nice one. I want to know, like I said, I'm going to show you some of my favorites. Let's take it off. So here, if you haven't gone and downloaded the update, what are you waiting for? It's right there waiting for you. Go get the update. And here we have our new home screen. Pardon me. And the best way to get going here is in the add-ons section of the new home screen. So here we actually introduce to you some of the biggest names. I think some of the best plugins that we made sure ahead of Max, that we worked very closely with our partners, to create really great plugins. Some first class inexperienced sort of plugins for designers using XD. So here you can sort of go and you can install these right away, which is really awesome. So if I wanted to go and install the Trello plugin, I just simply click there, and there it is, it's installed. So that's super handy. But then while I'm here, and this is available, if you go to you can go to the plugins tab here up in the menu, and I think this is in the hamburger menu on Windows, because that's another thing I want to mention here.
Yeah.
This isn't just for Mac. We're showing it on Mac today, but this is cross-platform.
Yep. And this was another thing that we really wanted to make it as sort of magical and clean and smooth as we could, where if you are writing a plugin and you only have a Mac or you only have a Windows machine and you can't easily test it on the other platform, or you're just doing it quickly, we want to make it so that you don't have to really think about the cross-platform stuff. XD takes care of a lot of that for you. So it'll lay out matching the look and feel that is slightly different on XD between Mac and Windows. You don't have to worry about if you're dealing with the file system, the slash being the other direction. We cover all that stuff over in I think a really elegant way. So that you can write a plugin and sort of have a good experience for users of XD on both platforms and every other scenario. And we'll talk about other sort of things that follow that theme, I guess, a bit later. But
definitely. Yeah. Oh, so here, this is great, actually. This is really cool. So Pablo Klaschka, who's actually looks like the developer of the Lorem Ipsum plugin, here on the stream today. And Pablo, I loved this plugin, and I have a really cool story about it. Oh, it looks like I have an update. This is also another cool piece of this. Is that, again, once you've submitted that plugin, you can submit updates, and those updates will be and there it is, ready for me to update right inside the app. So I'm gonna update it. I was doing a.
And that was it, by the way. There was no. You didn't even see a progress bar or whatever.
Gosh.
It's done. It's updated.
So I was designing something at a live demo at Max, and I was designing an app from scratch, with XD, as one does when you're showing off how cool XD is. And as I was designing, I was like, oh, here's a text box, and I need to fill it with something. And then in kind of my past workflow, I'd go out to some Lorem Ipsum generator, or I'd have something, on my copy paste, copy paste that in. And I was like, hold on a second, I think I saw a plugin for that. And so I went up and I found it right there, Pablo's plugin, Lorem Ipsum. I installed it, and within like seconds, I had filled in my design with Lorem Ipsum. So bravo, Pablo. That was such a, awesome. I mean, that's the moment I think we're really looking for as designers, and I think something we really strove for as a team to create a great experience around. So look at that. So here we are, and we're searching for any type of plugin that we might want. And like, there they are. There's some new ones. Actually, Color Ranger I haven't installed yet, so I'm definitely gonna do that. And I think someone mentioned Rename It, which of course is a classic. So I'm gonna grab that one. And that's it. It's now ready for me to go and work on. So if I create a new document here, now what I can do, of course, is go up to the plugins menu, and all of my plugins are now here and available. So let's actually go and check out the Pablo's while he's here on the stream. So I'm going to make a text box here, and I'm going to go and have it selected, and I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to.
I gotta get out of the edit.
I gotta get out of the edit. Sorry, I had to get out of the edit.
Make like a placeholder.
Yep. No, that's not good to do. All right, so I'm gonna make that, make sure it's there and selected, and I can go here and say fill with placeholder text, and that pops up this nice panel here. And Peter, you want to talk about this as well, because this is a key thing that some things here we're providing for developers.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. So it's kind of an overview of what you can do in plugins.
Yeah.
Plugins have a range of different capabilities in XD. You can read all the document content. You can modify the document. You can show UI like you see here. You can pop up a dialog box and fully custom UI with all kinds of rich controls in there. You can do file I/O, you can talk to the network, so it's a really rich capability already, and we are, even though we just finished this big launch, we're really hit the ground running right afterward, adding more features that you're going to see in future waves of XD.
Yeah, so you're really, and for those kind of non-technical people out there, you're really kind of almost like giving the document now, like all the bundle of information about what you're doing in XD, you're sort of building your own little kind of like sockets for every piece of that document.
Yeah.
Right. So here, what's happening behind the scenes is you've written an API to address a text box or a text object on Canvas, and now Pablo is able to sort of see that and tap into it and then create this UI. So behind the scenes, Pablo is doing something to kind of populate this data, right? And then I'm going to choose Lorem Ipsum, and I have some options here, and I'm going to include some line breaks, and I'm just going to insert that text, and bam, there it is. And it actually inserts the text that fits in that text box, which is really cool. Yeah. Which is really cool. So Pablo, thank you for this. This is amazing. This is amazing. Again, like, it's just one of those. It was so simple. I just was like, oh, let me see if there's a plugin for that, and I went and found it and bam, install it. There it is.
And so, by the way, getting your own plugin in this listing is a pretty easy process. It's another thing where I was saying before, we want to make it as smooth as possible. All the steps in the workflow of writing a plugin and sharing it with the world. So. You basically just like zip up your plugin files. There's a little form you fill out, you upload them, and you get into this listing.
Yep.
It's that easy.
Yep. So yeah, and everybody's kind of got some great ideas here. So Carrie, of course, is great that Carrie's here, and he's recording maybe some of this great direct user feedback. So I think we saw some suggestions there about alphabetical order and more previews. Here actually, so with each of these, you can actually see some more details. So if I wanted to find out about this plugin. Again, I think over time we hope to provide I think the team has an idea to provide more kind of visual information about this plugin. But here, the developer can actually provide some information about what this plugin does. And this is going to continue to get, I think, to be added to over time. So, and then again, like here, I can sort of go in and check those out before I install them. And or I can just install and try it out. Like I said, like there's no harm in doing that. It's really easy to uninstall. Like if you said, oh, this is actually one maybe I didn't find as useful, or it's something I want to just kind of clean up what I'm working with, you can just really easily uninstall them as well as update. So super handy. So I'm going to show off quickly here one of my favorites just before we get to the nitty gritty of it, because like I say, this one was, again, I was designing this thing, this app live at Max for a demo, and I wanted to create an app for one of my favorite movie directors, Akira Kurosawa.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so I was like, oh, I want to be able to sort of browse all the movie titles that all the movies that he's created. Maybe I can dive in and find some more information out, kind of about them. And so what I did was I actually had a Google Doc that I had created. And let me just go. I should have had that open. Where did it go? Oh, it's a sheet. Sorry, I had a Google Sheet. That's where it was. That's why I always forget to have it open. So I had this Films of Kurosawa Google Sheet. And I was kind of imagining like this might be a scenario where if this is a real project, I might have a content developer that I'm working with. So I'm able to, and maybe this is being provided by someone else on my team. And what I want to do as a designer is sort of flow all of this into my design really easily. But of course, I'd have to copy and paste and sort of manage that separately. Yeah. But again, this is kind of my favorite plugin, which is one of the favorites is this Google Sheets plugin.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, really awesome. So what I'm able to do now is actually paste a public link to my Google Sheet here inside this plugin. And what this plugin is going to do is actually take that content from my Google Sheet and flow it right into my design. So I'm going to hit continue here. And this is really handy. So what it does is it looks at all the elements that I have selected from the XD document, and I can map them to columns in my Google Sheet. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to map director to, of course, the director column. And I'm going to do movie title to, of course, I call it film title, a little more properly inside of my Google Doc. And this is really cool. So I have a URL to the image from the Criterion Movie site.
I didn't even know it could do this. That's really
this
cool.
is so cool. This is so cool. All right, so then I go, okay, I'm gonna map the rectangle to my thumbnail. Watch this. Oh, what did it do with the image?
Huh.
Let me try that again. Let's try that again.
But yeah, if you do it as a repeat grid, it's even more cool.
Oh, this is even more. This is even cooler.
More than one.
This is even cooler. All right, so I'm gonna do this real quick. All right, so now, because this also works with repeat grid, so let's go back, and now I can actually just refresh the content. Boom.
There you go. Cool.
There you go. I think what it did is it randomized content, and that one I didn't have a thumbnail. Yep. That's what it was. And these are some really cool plugins. You guys should dig in, check them out, tell us your favorite. And now, again, to dig right into the heart of it, so Peter and I were kicking around some ideas. Again, like Peter and I, we know the graveyard of features that we haven't shipped for XD.
Yeah.
We know where the bodies are buried in a lot of sense because we've been here for a bit.
Yeah.
And one of our early inspirations was some of our favorite features from Illustrator, actually. And so Peter had kind of sent me a list of things that we could do in, less than an hour. And one that he told me sounded like the blend feature inside of Illustrator, which I don't know if any of you have used this, but what's really cool about it is I can take a shape, I can take two shapes, and I can essentially have a bunch of shapes here. And what I can do is I want kind of a nice gradient effect to sort of blend those colors together. And so inside of Illustrator, there's this blend option down here, and I can say make. Oh, this one does the shape one. Where's the color one? Actually, let me just do this. So what you can do is essentially blend those colors, and in this case, it actually blends the shapes. But today we're not going to do that. But there you go. Yeah, but again, like this kind of seemed like a really cool thing. Is like, what if you had like some shapes and you had one color on one end and another color on the other, and you wanted to sort of blend them together and make a nice sort of gradient, not just within one shape, but actually across some shapes. So we thought that could be a really cool plugin to build. And what's even cooler is if we get this done today, we're actually gonna make this available for all of you to go and actually download and install.
There we go.
Like right after the stream, just to put like one more like cool, amazing sort of cap on top of it. So, all right, let's jump it over to Peter's screen, and then we'll kick things off here.
All right, cool. So let's see how do I want to frame this? Yeah. Yep. So we want to make this plugin live, and so the first thing I'm going to do is just get started with a sort of framework of a plugin, like a template to get started with. And one of the best places to start for that is we have a public GitHub repo. So for people who know GitHub a little bit from the open source world, we have a GitHub repo that has a bunch of sample code for plugins, and we have one in particular called the Quick Start that's designed to just be like a really simple template to just get you started. So to make a plugin in XD, oh, and by the way, I should give even higher level, like the way you write plugins in XD is with JavaScript code. So if you've done any kind of coding on the web and you know JavaScript even a little bit, like that's how you do plugins. It's simple to get started with. It's code that runs inside XD, so it's not running in a web browser or Node, it's running inside of XD in a JavaScript engine that actually has access to the XD document really immediately, and we'll see just how cool that is.
Yeah.
So to make a plugin, you really only need 2 files. You need at least one JavaScript file as your kind of entry point, and then you need a JSON file that kind of defines like the name of your plugin and what menu items it has and that sort of stuff. So to get started, I'm basically just going to download these 2 files and use them as my starting point. So,
and one of my favorite ways, and I remember this from my early days of sort of hacking around the web, is actually to start with the sample file. Like, that's sort of a great way to get going, and you can kind of hack around and kind of get the sense of how the pieces are working together. So, and even if you're not like you don't have a lot of experience in code today, maybe this is the thing that might jumpstart about some of that interest. Like I said, like Peter and the team are putting together some processes to hopefully make this really, really, really simple. So.
So I hope I'll convince everyone who's watching that this is really easy to do. Okay, so I've got the 2 files, I've got them downloaded, here they are. Next thing you need to do is put them in a location where XD actually knows that that's a plugin that we want to run. So we make this really easy in XD, and I started drawing some circles here to use as part of this blending thing, although I think I don't have them spaced out evenly, so Talin probably doesn't like it, but whatever. Well, I'm the engineer, I can get away with it. I can take liberties.
That's why there's distribution snapping, Peter.
I know, well I was using that and then I think I dragged it a little too far, and now I'm gonna...
Hey,
it's
Matthias.
gonna bother my OCD too.
What's up, man? Good to see you.
There we go. Okay, so those little pink rectangles there is what Talon's
There you go.
about.
There you go.
Sure
That's it. Okay, good. Cool. Thank you.
So back to the code. So I don't have any plugins installed in XD right now, so my plugins menu is really short here. You notice there's a submenu called Development. And this is where all the little commands are to get started with working on XD plugins. And we're just gonna go to Show Develop folder. And this will just bring up in Finder or Windows Explorer, it's going to bring up the location where we want to put plugins for XD to run them. And the develop folder kind of has some special meaning on the XD side, so it knows that it's a plugin that you're actively working on. So we'll see in a moment how that kind of XD helps us out by knowing that it's a plugin that you're in the middle of modifying the code of. You can have more than one plugin in development, so each one goes in its own folder here. So I'm just going to, or actually, let's see, what do we want to call it? Blender, sure.
Yeah.
We're gonna call it Blender. So I go into this folder and I'm just gonna drag in these 2.
Copy them into our folder.
Exactly, I'm just gonna bring in those 2 files that we downloaded and go back to XD, and I'm gonna go back to the development submenu, and there's another command under here, reload plugins, and that's gonna just basically scan through that folder and pick up any plugins that I added. And now we can see there's a new menu item here that comes from that starter project.
There it is.
So I'm gonna click create rectangle, and we can actually see the plugin has done something. It's just added a rectangle.
It's reading those files, and that's the starter project right there.
So that's your starter project. It just adds a rectangle. It's really simple, and then we can expand on that as we need. So I'm gonna actually go open this folder in a code editor so we can look at the code and start working on it.
Excellent. So Jan had a question, of course. Peter, would you say that as someone with maybe OCD tendencies, is that better for coding or worse for coding, would you say?
I think a lot of good engineers and good designers, I gotta say, have a little bit of OCD because attention to detail. Yeah, you have to be detail oriented.
That's important.
You want to be able to see the forest too, but details really matter.
I may not be able to schedule my day very well with all my meetings, but I can pinpoint those inaccuracies in any design when it comes to the type spacing, the kerning. So, Peter could do the same with looking at, by just glancing at your code. So.
Yeah, you gotta get the naming and the formatting and all this. So actually here, I'll walk through the code real quick. I'll look at the manifest file first because it's just really simple. You name your plugin. When you're getting ready to submit it, you basically get an ID for it, so it has an ID in the listing there, and you'll fill that in when you're ready to submit it. Some basic data about what the version is. And then we have a way here that the plugin can define what menu items it's going to add. You can add more than one menu item, you could add submenus, you can add keyboard shortcuts to your menu items.
Nice.
The starter project here is really simple. It's just adding that one menu item we saw before called create rectangle. So really, really simple. And then this last bit, the command ID, is basically defining what piece of JavaScript code is going to run when you click the menu item. So if you remember this ID here called, it's like create rectangle, but camel case, like a identifier in code. We go back to the code here, and you'll see that same identifier down here. And this is basically connecting that menu item sort of declaration in the JSON file. It's connecting it to the name of a function, which is this function up here. And so that's the code that's going to run when we click that menu item. So pretty simple sort of connection there.
Cool.
And then so we've got this function here require, which is loading a set of APIs from XD called the scene graph APIs. And the scene graph is our term for like the document structure. So if it's a little bit like the DOM hierarchy in HTML or like the hierarchy of SVG tags. But it's specific to XD, and it kind of matches really closely to what you see. Whoops, that's the wrong one. What you see in the layers panel. So if there's hierarchy, grouping, you get that nested structure there.
There you go.
And I can even show, it's a good opportunity to talk about the documentation because we have a cool diagram I can show there. So if you go to adobeXDplatform.com, that's the landing page for our documentation, our developer community where people give us feedback and ask questions, all the info you need, as well as the place you can log in and actually submit your plugin to get added to that listing. So if I go to the overview, it's going to bring me to the main XD sort of API documentation. And I'm going to go down to API reference, and I'm going to go to scene graph, and that's that module that
all the pieces. That's a really handy diagram
so
on there
graph
as well.
This is what we're looking at. And yeah, this diagram here is just kind of a simple overview of like, you can see the structure in the layers panel, and you can see this hierarchy of the scene graph nodes matches that structure in the layers panel.
There's a question about shortcuts, and if you notice, Peter said you can define shortcuts. So if your favorite plugin doesn't have a shortcut, maybe bug that developer a little bit, get them to add one. Or if you're using Mac, you actually can assign shortcuts to any menu item in your apps using some of the deeper customization of the OS features.
Yeah, there's
Mac.
like a standard Mac OS feature for that. But we're also definitely planning on giving users more control over plugins in XD in the future.
That's a feature. That's a very highly requested feature. So if you want that feature, also go vote that on our user voice as well.
There you go.
So
yeah. All right, so let me walk through how the sample plugin code works really quickly. Again, all it's doing is adding a purple rectangle to the document. And so it's really simple. It's making a new rectangle. Rectangle is one of the types of objects or scene nodes that exist in XD. It's giving it a width and a height. It's giving it a fill color. It's leaving the stroke at the default, which is no stroke at all.
No stroke at all.
And or I guess XD calls it border in the UI, but it's called stroke in the API. A little mismatch there, but and then it's going to actually add that rectangle to the document. And we have a shortcut here that XD gives you to basically make it easy to create plugins that are adding new content to the document. You don't have to think about where in the document is the right place to insert things because XD takes care of tracking that for you. So if the user's sort of looking at a particular artboard right now, this will tell you that's the artboard to add it to. If the user is drilled down into a group, it's going to say add it inside the group. So we get that nice UX in every plugin for free. XD takes care of that for you.
And a good way to think about plugins, if you're thinking about one that you might want to do, you can either add stuff to XD or you can push stuff out. That's kind of the simple way I like to think about it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you can generate content or you can export things. And you can also manipulate existing content, which is kind of more like what we're going to write today, where you're going to have a bunch of shapes and we're going to be modifying their colors or whatever.
So Jan, just quickly, Adobe Bridge does not have a user voice. But there might be some people on Twitter that you might be able to contact. Because I'm sure I know some team members of mine who would love to talk to you. You want to talk about Bridge? Sorry.
Cool.
Go ahead. All right.
Yeah, no, all good. So that's basically it, right? It's adding a rectangle and it's kind of moving it a little so it's not stuck in the corner. And that's all that this sample plugin does. So it's just kind of really simple scaffolding for us to get started and adding things to. And so let's get started actually changing this code. For example, like let's say we don't like purple. We're going to talk about creating colors a bunch. So we'll start by looking at changing the color that is generated by default here. So I could change this to like red. And we can use any of the CSS color names here, for example. So all I have to do is save the change to the code, go back to XD, go back to that reload command, or I could use that keyboard shortcut to hit reload. And if I run the plugin again, we're going to see that change like that.
Man, so
that's all you have to do. You put those files in the development folder that XD points you at, and you can hit reload to pull in your code changes. That's it. There's no SDK to download. There's no special things you have to configure or anything like that. You just work on code in whatever code editor you want. So again, that's that theme. We wanted to make it like as simple as possible to, simple and low friction and high productivity. And another thing that's kind of cool, by the way, I want to call attention to is I can get rid of this rectangle just by hitting undo. Like if I go over here, you can see in the undo menu, it's even saying the name of our plugin command. So everything you do in a plugin automatically works with XD's like undo, redo, and all that stuff, just completely automatically. You don't have to think about that. If you look at the code, there's nothing in here that's trying to do anything special. It's just taken care of for you. So again, you get nice sort of polished UX for your plugin users right out of the box. Okay, cool. So what we want to actually start doing now is making a plugin that's going to do this blending stuff. So if I make like one of these circles red and I make the other one blue, and yeah, we basically want to be able to say, okay, we're going to select all of these and blend the colors across them. So, so the first thing we want to do is actually be able to look at like what are the things that are selected here? Like how do we know which ones are actually going to modify? So that's pretty easy. We have this selection object that gets passed into your plugin whenever you run a plugin command. So I'm gonna get rid of this part because we're not actually gonna really make a new rectangle anymore. We're gonna work with these existing shapes. They might not even be rectangles. I'm gonna keep that line because we're gonna work with colors a little bit. And I think, okay, and so we're not gonna insert anything new, and I'll get rid of the move as well.
Yeah, because we're not creating, we're modifying what's already on canvas.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm sort of ditching half that code. That was a good intro and starting point, but we don't need it. So, okay, the first thing we wanna do is figure out what's like the first color, and let's look at the docs actually, because I sort of know some of the stuff off the top of my head, but if you're starting out, how would you figure this out?
How would you figure out like how do you parse the selection? What are the right terms to use?
Exactly. So if we go to selection in the docs, there's a little intro here that sort of explains how selection works and what kinds of things you get. And then it'll tell you what are all the properties on the selection object. So we already saw that insertion parent object that we're using to insert the rectangle.
Put this is a new thing in the scene graph.
Because it's kind of related to the selection and the context and all that, so it's given to you as part of the selection. And then there's property items that tells you what are the actually currently selected things. And that's just an array of these scene nodes, these objects in XD. So we're gonna look at selection items 0, which is the first selected item. And what counts as first in the order they come in is a little tricky. We'll circle back on that, I think, toward later on here, but we'll just say, okay, item number 0, and that's gonna have a fill. And then the end point of our blend is gonna be the opposite of that, so it's gonna be selection items, and we're gonna go for the last one, which looks like that. So for people who have worked with arrays and programming before, this probably looks pretty familiar. If not a whole lot, basically the first item is 0, and so the last item is not length, but length minus 1 because we started counting at 0. So that's gonna be the last item there. Now I wanna make sure that I'm doing this right because I could have typos in here, or I could have misunderstood the API. So I'm actually just gonna print out those values, and you can use console.log in XG, so just like what you are used to if you're writing JavaScript code in a browser, for example, or pretty much anywhere JavaScript runs, this is a standard convention. So I'm gonna go back to XD, and first I'll do a reload again to get those code changes.
All your stuff,
And then before I run it again though, I'm actually going to open the developer console. So that's another menu item under in the submenu. And this gives us a really easy way to see all of that output that the console console log statement is making. So let's see, what's the best? Okay, I guess they're arranged side by side. I could do vertical or whatever, but so I'm just going to leave that there so I can see what's going on. I'll go back to the plugin and I'm going to run that command again. And oh yeah, so see, actually it's unhappy about something there. So what did I screw up? And it's going to tell me the line number, which is really handy.
Which one?
Line 8. So I'm not sure if it's color 1 or color 2. It's actually color 2. Ah, of course. I forgot. It's not. It's items is the thing that's an array.
That you're looking for.
I was missing that property there. That's unintentional, by the way. This is. I didn't do that like to give an example of debugging or whatever. This is just really live coding. It's kind of error prone. So people make mistakes.
It's like with anything. You test it. You see what happens, and then you like, oh, you go back and you fix it, or you come up with a better idea to go and solve your problems. Yeah.
So this is actually a good opportunity to point out that not only does this thing list out any of your plugin log messages that you're logging yourself. If anything goes wrong in your plugin, you'll get an error message here. So it might be an error message from XD, or it might be, in this case, the plugin code itself had a problem, and you'll get like an exception stack trace, just like you'd see, anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna hit the shortcut for reload this time because that's nice and fast, and you'll see there's a little bit of stuff logged here just to confirm that the reload happened, which is nice too. Now if I run it again, now I'm gonna get these two little objects, which are the colors. So okay, that's a good confirmation that we're on the right track here. All right, so let me, before we go any further too, it's kind of bugging me. Speaking of OCD, it's kind of bugging me that this thing, the menu item still says create rectangle, which is not what it does anymore. Not what this is. So what do we want to call it?
Blender.
There we go. Okay, so pretty simple. And we could rename this too, but I don't really care. So
yeah, hopefully Daniel and others in the chat who have never done much with JavaScript before, hopefully maybe this is a nice way in. And again, this is going to be recorded and archived on YouTube, so this will be a great resource if you learn a little more and you want to come back and you look at the documentation that the team's providing, because there's a lot of information there, and we're only scratching the surface on what's available there. But I think from the starter files in that documentation, you should be able to get going.
Yeah. We have a lot of different samples of how to do more complex things as well. So once you get sort of off the ground a little bit, there's still more stuff to help you along, and we have a great community in the forums.
Yeah, that's right. I was gonna say the forums are right there as well, and they're all people just like you that may want to create their first plugins for XD, and they're right here on the Adobe XD platform website.
So if you go to that same website and you just hit the community link, you'll get to the forums, and you can ask questions, you can see what other people are working on, you can help out other people, all that good stuff.
Anel had a good point, yeah. Anel, actually, that label plugin, I think, is doing a very similar thing like Blender, and we're doing it with color, and the label one is doing it with text.
Yeah, which I think is a plugin that Carrie wrote, I believe.
Yeah,
so that was one of the early sample plugins that we created.
that.
So yeah, this is probably going to be very similar code to that. Maybe we can even merge them together. Who knows? You know.
Who knows?
All right, cool. So what's the next thing we want to do? So now I want to actually like loop over the items that I'm going to change the color of.
Do the color. Yeah.
So I've already got the starting and end colors are already what we want them to be. So I'm gonna, and there's different ways we could do this, anyway. So it's one of the things of an engineer, right? I'm thinking through my head, there's like 5 different ways I could do this. Which is the one that, do they have advantages or not? I'm like, okay, whatever.
No, it's straightforward.
This will work fine, so it's close enough. So I'm gonna skip over the items that
already have
the correct color.
So the first one and the last one, we're gonna skip over them.
Yeah, and so we're starting with item number 1, and because the numbering starts at 0, item number 1 is the second one that's been selected.
Yep.
And we're gonna stop before we get to length -1, because this is less than, not less than equals, right? So normally when you go over an array, you would just do that. We're adding that -1 there to stop one item early. I think it would actually work fine to do the beginning and end ones if I get the math right here, because it's just going to set it to the same color it already has. Either way, whatever. So we're looping across here. Oh, and so there's different ways to interpolate color values, right? There's like RGB blending, there's HSV blending, there's what's the other one, like chroma blending. I think honestly we can probably get away with just doing simple RGB blending, because for example, if I made a gradient here, and just make it horizontal so it lines up with these items, right? If I do a gradient between those colors, I think that's basically what we want.
Yeah,
that's what we
a good
want
starting
to put.
point.
Yeah. And so these should sort of match up like that. And gradients are simple RGB blending. So what that means is that we're taking for each of those 3 color channels, red, green, and blue, we're just taking the color at the beginning, the value at the end, and we're just smoothly interpolating between them. So if you're halfway across the distance, so one of these middle objects here, it'll be 50-50 mix of the 2 values. And we'll be doing that with the RGB colors.
I mean, and today that's actually, you kind of showed the way that I might solve that today, which is actually make a gradient and then mask it inside of each of these shapes.
Or color pick from different points on it. It's a bunch of manual work. The more of these you have, and this is a sample plugin, right? So you could, of course, a real plugin like the confetti plugin, for example, does positioning of potentially hundreds of objects, and like you could do that with 5 objects manually pretty easily. But when it's more, having the automation of a plugin to help you out is really, really clutch. Okay, let's see.
Hey, I was gonna say, shout out to Parker. Parker, former Adobe design intern, now out doing amazing things in the world. Great to see you here, man. Good to see you. Yeah, we hopefully, this is the goal, is to hopefully inspire you to maybe make some really cool stuff for XD.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we want to hear what everyone else is going to build. This is one of the things that to me is the most fun, having worked really hard to build all these capabilities, is to get to see what other people build with them, to see that creativity opened up.
I mean, that's the goal of XD too, right? I mean, that's what keeps us coming here to work every day, right? Is that we want to create, hopefully, things that help you create great work.
Yeah, seeing the creativity that comes out using through XD, expressed through XD is just really incredible. Certainly keeps me going. Okay, so let's, here's what I was gonna do. I'm gonna go back to the docs for the color object actually, and because we want to work with colors, we want to work with RGB, and there's different ways to do that math, but thankfully XD actually makes it pretty easily. We actually give you RGB values straight out, so you don't have to deal with manipulating bits and masking things out, which sometimes if you're working with graphics on a really technical app or a high performance app, you have to do a lot of like fiddly little math things. We don't have to do that.
We're listing that all out.
So the math here should be pretty simple. It's just going to be basically proportions. Let's look at so let's just deal with one color channel for now and just make sure we're getting that right. So I'm gonna, for each of the objects along the way, the first thing I really want to do is figure out what's the blending percent. And I think we can do that as just the which object along the distance here that we're looking at divided by the value of the last object. I'll just do a mental sort of arithmetic check here. When we're at the first object, we want it to be 100% one and 0% the other. So 0 divided by anything is going to be 0. When we're at the far other end, the final object that has color 2, that's going to be, its position in this list would be length minus 1, again, because we started counting at 0. So length minus 1 divided by length minus 1 is 100%. So I think that math is pretty good.
Yep.
So then let's try to just figure out what the red channel would be. So when you do like linear interpolation, you're basically picking a starting color or starting value, and you are adding on the basically what's the delta or the difference between the starting value and the ending value. So you could picture this visually as like you've got a line, you have a start point and an end point, and if you want to interpolate between them and get points on that line, you're just figuring out, well, what's the actual distance in each axis, x and y. What's the distance, and you're just proportionately adding a percentage of that distance. So we can basically do percent times, the difference here is just going to be color 2.r minus color 1.r. So this is, we're treating color 1 as the start point, and we're basically saying color 2 is the end point. So that's the difference between them. If we add 100% of that, we're going to be adding exactly that distance. So if this is, if percent is a 0 and we're at the beginning, we're going to get only color 1. If percent is 100%, which is 1.0 at the end, if we sort of look at the math here, that basically turns into color 1 plus color 2 minus color 1, which is just color 2. So we've completed the blend at that point. So for now, I'm just going to print out that stuff just to make sure it's kind of working. I'll get rid of the other console log thing because we don't really need it. So we're just looking at what percent we're at and what we think the red value is going to be. So I'll go back here again and reload and run that. And cool, so we're going from 20%, 40, 60, 80. That kind of makes sense for items in the middle.
We got that, yep.
And we've got the values here gradually decreasing in the red channel, which makes sense because we're going from max red to 0 red. Okay, so I think that's actually pretty good. And now I'm going to go ahead and actually create a new color entirely. So we've already got a color object here that we imported from the scene graph because that's what
we called it in.
Yeah, this earlier stuff was using. So I'm going to say new color. And instead of using a name, if we look at the docs here, there's different inputs we can give when we create a color, and we can actually just give it RGB, and actually even alpha, we can interpolate the opacity of the fill as well.
Nice.
So let's just throw that in there.
That.
I mean, why not? Yeah, that's one extra line of code. So this is taken as an object. So in JavaScript, if I just want to make a simple object inline, I put curly braces, and then I put property and value pairs, key value pairs. So the R is going to be what we had already. I'll just move that down. And then I'm just gonna duplicate this basically. RGBA, that's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna use a neat trick. If anyone has a modern code editor, like this is Brackets, the open source editor, which I used to work on, so it's very near and dear to me, but you could, if you're using Sublime or VS Code or something like that, modern code editors have this really cool feature where you can select multiple separate pieces of text. And so what I can do is G,
what? I didn't know that.
A, done.
Oh my gosh. That's it. Okay. So we did the hard work up front, and now we can just repeat it down.
So now it's just all sort of duplicated through. Nice. So that should be okay. I'm going to take a leap of faith without doing any more logging to test this, and I'm just going to say selection.items I, which is where we're at in the array, dot fill equals that color. So whatever fill it has before is getting blown away and replaced by this color that I just created. And we'll go back to XD, give that a reload, and run it. And there we go. I think it's alive.
Amazing.
It's working. So wow. That is.
I mean, we jumped through. I think, and like some of this again, like Peter is a pro. So, but again, like I just forgot his name. Mentioned there's actually a lot of great sort of starter projects being created by the community. Yeah. So there's a starter file from the XD team, and then there are other ones that you can build on top of and kind of pull apart and learn from. There's great documentation there, and again, like Peter's a pro, guys. So, yeah, again, like he did this, and he knew the math and how to handle the array. But again, like that took you 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes,
like that. Yeah.
As we were talking about it. Anel, I'm glad to see the tornado warning's over.
Oh, whew, yeah. Jeez,
man,
where was that happening?
Okay, Anel, I think is in Florida. I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
If I remember correctly, Anel, you have to correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
So we've basically got that going. There's one thing that I think I should have added here that I didn't, and it worked partly through luck, probably, because if you notice, we got lucky with the number of objects, and that percentage was like really
perfect.
Clean
it was like
number.
right on there.
If we had like 7 objects, it would be like 0.117, blah, 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 whatever. It'd be some irrational number.
Yeah.
So what we really want is these things are probably supposed to be a whole number.
Yeah.
So probably just to make sure that this plugin doesn't have any bugs in it. Here, I'm going to do the multi-selection thing again, so I don't have to type this 4 times, but we just want to round that.
Oh, good.
To
just tell it.
A whole number, just like that, yeah.
Okay.
So that should basically cover it.
Okay.
And yeah, so, and again, undo, redo just kind of works.
Just works,
right? So I'm making
right
a whole bunch of changes to the document. I'm changing however many items there are, and they all undo and redo together, because XD just kind of wraps it up for you. So yeah, so that's sort of like how you do it.
It feels like magic. Like this process, just getting your starter project going. Again, like having the detailed sort of, having some background knowledge is helpful. But again, the team has worked really hard to provide that documentation. And of course, as the community grows, again, a lot of these are just open sourced, right? They're ways that, again, you can actually pick up and riff on, projects that people have already created, and to kind of wrap your head around kind of the concepts that are going on there. And of course, you can always reach out to Carrie on Twitter, and Peter is also on Twitter. Anel had a great idea. We should talk to the Adobe Live team about this sometime. Actually, doing developer weekly challenges.
Yeah, like we do the designer challenge.
Yeah,
do a developer
that
challenge.
Could be really
That's
cool.
Awesome. Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Very cool idea. Totally
nice.
So we've got time. We could keep playing with this, right? We could riff on some other ideas here. I get the sense that's kind of theme of your live stream a lot of times, like riffing on designs.
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff.
I mean, that's like
we can riff on the code too. If we
there's something about the foundational sort of statement, the design at the speed of thought. Where the sort of underlying ethos there is that the less you can have to manage things, the less you have to take that overhead of thinking too far ahead, and the more the tools are just there waiting at your fingertips, the more ideas and the farther you can go.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that sort of extends not just in terms of how we sort of design, but how we can engineer and implement everything about XD.
Yeah.
And again, plugins, they feel like XD, which is amazing, right? Like you and the team and Carrie and the team working on kind of plugins. Again, it really is just the start. Like they really are building a system that, again, like people can get in and maybe this is their first time creating a plugin. And I mean, there were people, like Color Ranger or some of the other Astute Graphics, people who actually built careers on top of building plugins.
Yeah.
Right. They had an idea. They were able to take advantage of the great platforms that Adobe tools provide. Yeah. And they were able to create kind of their own sort of source of creativity, and expand that and grow that. And VSCO.
VSC, which one is that?
The camera editor on on the iPhone. They started as plugins for Lightroom and for Photoshop.
Yeah, and it's really cool to just enable other people. I mean, and I think that's always been one of our goals with XD at the very beginning, right? I mean, it took us a little bit after XD became a product before extensibility was there, but from the very beginning, we always wanted extensibility to be part of XD, and we knew we wanted it to be a platform for people to experiment with ideas around creativity, ideas around design tooling, and being able to sort of let that part of your imagination run wild, just like you can with your design imagination.
Yeah. So if you guys have any questions, again, I know we went pretty deep today, little different than the normal design topics, but I think this is an amazing sort of resource. And Peter, again, congrats on the work and the team launching this, because this is just and of course, thanks for coming and really riffing on this with me in real time. Where can we? Are we going to post this? Are we going to make it available? Can people go
we can do that. I guess we should figure out if we want to merge it with Carrie's thing, which kind of does the same thing with text. So Carrie, you and I should figure that out, I guess, and then we'll get it posted. And there's some little tweaks we could make to this. I mean, we could play with that for a few minutes if you want.
Sure, let's do it while we're taking some questions. We could
sort of try to do some like onboarding type stuff, like geez, if I haven't selected items, maybe we should pop up an exclamation of you've got to select at least 3 things, or else it kind of doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's nothing to do.
We could look at. Like in this case, I think we're sort of getting a little lucky in how because I'm just doing a marquee selection here, and I think the fact that I made these things in Like the left to right blend order that I want is the same as their
Z
order, their stacking order. And so I think we're getting the order we want from this kind of marquee selection, like just automatically. But if these were out of order, you'd probably have to like manually
click them
each
yeah,
like that.
It could be the order that way.
So like maybe there's some polish we could do, where we sort the items by their X or their Y. We could even this is I think in the theme of XD magic, right? We could be like, well, if you look at their positions, are they mostly laid out horizontally or mostly vertically, and then decide automatically whether to sort by X or Y, so the plugin's user doesn't have to tell you which direction they go in, and they don't have to worry about getting them in the right Z order. So we could play with stuff like that. I mean, we could play with, you know, we could like the Illustrator thing where these circles don't exist and it actually creates
and it just create the circle.
That's something that we could do. Why don't we try that real quick?
Let's do that real quick.
That's pretty cool. I think showing like onboarding UI is pretty neat because we get to like show what UI looks like and talk about that. So we got 9 minutes. Okay, let me see if I can squeeze in a little bit of both.
I mean, what I like about kind of where you were going with that is this started to actually get at kind of the intersection of you know, a tool and the UI and UX around it. You know, like it would be actually quite significant to have that message to be like, oh, select some things first, right? And you start to get into, again, helping people understand, you know, what the tool will be able to do and some of the rules governing it. And that starts to get into that kind of design world. And, you know, like I've talked a lot, like you mentioned earlier, there could be many different ways you go about doing this in code, but, you know, you've got the experience built up where now you have kind of at least the closer to correct way that you feel you want to do it, and you know it's a creative endeavor, just like design.
And there's lots of ways to skin a cat. I mean, this isn't the only way you could write this plugin at all. There's lots of different ways it could be done. And okay, so I'll just show real quick, like if you wanted to give some kind of onboarding message, you can do a lot with UI and plugins. So at a high level, so this is interesting, right? This little snippet of code here is HTML code. But I said at the beginning, right, your plugin's running inside XD. It's not running inside a web browser. So what does this mean? XD has a pretty unique new UI technology that we've introduced called UXP, which is basically this really clever trick where you can use familiar modern HTML and CSS constructs and patterns to create UI in XD that's actually not a web browser, not HTML UI, but it's actually driving XD's own native UI that has platform-specific behavior, that gets XD's layout style and theming and all that automatically. So Windows, our UI controls have really cool behavior around pen and touch. Mac, we've added some polish to the UI controls above and beyond what a regular like text field, for example, in Mac OS would give you. And you know, and then XD has its own unique look and feel, and you don't have to worry about recreating that. So it's this cool sort of hybrid where you can use you know, libraries like React or Vue.js or jQuery, things you're familiar with on the web, but what you're actually doing is driving XD's own platform-specific native UI. So it's kind of we're aiming for the best of both worlds here, and so you can see what looks very familiar HTML here. It's a form tag and H1 and a footer containing a button and stuff like that. We have a little bit of extra stuff in here that's telling us how to do the XD specific styling, and that's really all there is. So I'm going to go ahead and set up some code here so that if the user has not selected enough things, which is to say they haven't selected at least one thing to blend between, then what we should do instead is, we'll just, oops, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to show dialog. So we're just going to pop up a message and then not do any of the blending in that case. So I'm going to change the hello world to, you know, let's see, error. That's not the nicest string, but you know,
that's a good place to start.
Yeah, exactly. We can finesse that and
have some fun with it. You know?
Yeah. So all this is going to do is it's basically going to make this this dialog box HTML element, which we can actually display in XD by calling show. We don't really need any of this stuff, but I'll just leave that in for now, just in case we want to do something when the dialog box closes later. But this is like a very static, like alert kind of dialog that doesn't really, it's not interactive in any way. And in XD you can do much more powerful things with UI. You can put all kinds of, and we saw this in some of the examples Talin showed earlier, right?
Like
you can put
examples.
drop downs, you can put sliders, you can do all kinds of like real time.
Or your own UI even as well.
And your JavaScript code can react in real time as you're making changes in that dialog. You can open the dialog and then make a network call to start populating data into the dialog from a service, all kinds of cool stuff like that. So this is a really stripped down, very minimal example
And again, using the pieces that we're providing for you, some of those UI and actually that uses the styling like of XD.
Yep. So there you go. So that's not very friendly. It doesn't really tell you what you should do.
What you should do.
But that's a start, right? We've got a starting point.
I mean, quickly we should just say like select more things, or
exactly. But, so if I do something like that, and we could let's see,
select at least 3 items.
Yeah, select at least 3 items to create. And maybe errors actually. Sometimes you just say the name of the plugin or whatever, so the person knows what's going on. Let's try that again. Super fast reload. There you go.
Oh my goodness.
That's starting to look pretty good, right?
Yep, starting to feel more usable. Again, like, I might have accidentally not selected enough things, and this really helps me go like, oh, I know what I need to do, and go and fix this problem, and go back and do it.
There we go.
That is slick.
That's pretty fun. And let's see, I don't know, should we do a lightning round? I've got 4 minutes to try to actually.
Try to do,
All right, so if I get rid of those things.
We want to create them.
Yeah, so we want to create them. Okay, so. In that case, I'm actually going to take this back out because we are only going to select the 2 things. We're going to create everything else in between. Probably what you'd want to do in real life for a real plugin that's you're going to ship and other people would use it and it's general purpose useful is you actually would want a dialog where they put how many copies in a number or the amount of padding and then you compute the number of copies and that kind of thing. But we'll just how many did I have there? I had 4, so I'll just hard code that I'm going to make 4 copies just for the sake of illustration here. So. Okay, and I'm actually going to save off a copy of this. This is one of my little personal programming tricks. So I've got the original code there for reference if I want to refer to it if I accidentally break something here. So we're going to say n copies equals 4. And back in the API docs here, and by the way, we can share a link to this too. This is just kind of some starter code for dialog boxes that I like to use. We have other various pieces of starter code as well that are useful for different kinds of dialog UI. So one of the neat things in XD, we give you a bunch of APIs that expose like some of the regular menu item commands that users might run normally. So it's kind of like just automating XD's built-in features. And in particular, we've got the duplicate command here, which is pretty handy. So
and actually in our sample code before we had to create one, right? When we were with that first sample code that just creates a rectangle.
Yeah. So you can create nodes and then you can do different things like that. So if I were to go down here and so the thing we want to duplicate, I guess, is the first one. So I'll just save that off in a thing here. Selection.items.
Gonna make it
0. Oh, does it actually expire at a certain time?
You're still live on YouTube. But
oh, okay.
Oh, it cut.
We cut off. Okay, if you're still on YouTube.
Let's see if I can wrap this up really quick. This is my over ambition as usual here. So,
it's a first. It's a first for the stream.
Okay. Oh yeah. All right. Let's see. There's actually a couple tricky things here we're gonna need. So
yeah. Cool. It'll be available in the replay.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So let me wrap this up here. So one thing I didn't think through about how easy versus a little extra work here is that if we want to run that command, these commands operate on the selection. So I'm actually gonna have to save off both of those items.
Oh, before.
So that so here what I can do is actually change the selection, and that's the thing we're gonna duplicate. So we can say commands dot duplicate, and I need to pull in that API. So that, and I'm gonna because this is a different module from the scene graph. I'm going to pull that in separately. I'm going to duplicate that, and now what I have is the cloned one is the new selection. So we've got that there, and maybe real quick, just to make sure that that's working for me, I will print that out just to make sure it's actually working. So select 1, 2, reload, run that. No, it didn't create anything. Okay. Oh, right, because of this. So we want to change this to actually be creating the 4 copies this time. So I'm gonna tweak this just a little bit, the way it's doing the numbering.
Yeah.
Do it again. Okay, so now you can see it because they're all duplicates of the original one. There's just a whole stack of them here, and I can see they got printed out. So. So that's pretty good. Looks like that's on track. So yeah, the 2 things we want to do now is I think I just need to bring back this code here, except we're going to be doing it on the clone instead. So if I did the math here right with how I'm going through the copies, that should still work for this math. Oh, except we don't want to do that anymore. We want to do, well, it's basically n copies plus 2, I guess or is it n? It's n copies plus 1. Yeah. Is that right? No.
Minus 1?
Yes, no, it's +1, yeah, because we're... The last copy is exactly n copies is where I, and then there's one more past that, which is the final value. So they'll still stack up in a pile here, but if I run it now, we should get the different colors. Yep, looks like that's happening, so that's good.
Nice.
And then the last thing to do is to just position them. And I had a little bit of some stuff here from the sample code that I deleted, but if we look back at this guy, there's an API here which will let us move something. There's different APIs in XD for positioning things, and again, we try to take care of all the tricky cases, like things are rotated and this and that. Yep. In this case, it's a pretty simple API, because all we really want to do is move it relative to where it started, because the duplicate will always sit exactly where it is. So we sort of want to, and again, hand waving, just like we hard-coded the number of things, we're also going to hard-code, I think, which direction we're going to assume it's the x-axis. So what I want to do is figure out how much space there is in between them, because we're just going to interpolate that exactly as we interpolated the colors. So I'll just say like x delta or something. And so another API, I won't look it up in the docs this time, but if we, and here actually, let me move this down below these. So original, we have an API called bounds in parent. It's actually the final minus the original. Bounds in parent dot x. So that'll give us the amount of width we have to play with, and we basically just want to interpolate that. So we're not going to move it all on the y, and and we're gonna let's see, x times I think it's just x delta times the percent probably. And we don't even need to round it unless we want to sort of pixel snap things for people. But let's see how that works. Boom.
Oh, we're back. Nice.
So I ran over by 2 minutes, but I think that's pretty good.
But we're good. We're good.
Now it's actually automatically created.
It cut us off. And if we're back,
if
you guys are still seeing us, thanks for sticking with us. This has been amazing, Peter. Like, stellar work. This is, I mean, to you and to Carrie and to the whole team.
Yeah, everyone really worked super hard on this, and I think it turned out so awesome.
So
I'm just so excited to see what people are going to actually be able to build with this over time.
Tweet us on Twitter, at Known Issues, at Mr. Talin. We'd love to see what you guys are creating in XD, as always. Love to see if you want to dabble more into plugins. Definitely hit up Known Issues or Carry Shots on Twitter. They'll help you get going. Again, like, we really want to create tools that allow the community to create their best work. And to see what's possible with XD.
Yeah, so, and send us, even if you don't have questions, tweet out what you're working on. We want to see the cool stuff you're building. It's so exciting to see. It really
also,
is.
we do have to call out our shirts here.
Oh yeah,
Here we
Both
are.
Thanks
rocking
to Jay Meisner.
Jay Meisner.
So if you're
bug him on Twitter.
Yeah, or if you're in Europe and you see him at a UX design event of any kind, make friends with him. He's got such cool T-shirts. He really does.
Chris, you missed your shot if you're still with us at Max. He had them with him. The Ramones shirts.
Yeah, he had a whole bunch of them. But you'll see him
We'll
again
hit him again. We'll
someday.
hook you guys up. So. All right, thanks guys for joining us. We'll be back next week. We're going to do another full hour. I'm not sure what we're going to do yet. If you have any great ideas, let me know. We'll be back. We'll be doing something cool here with XD. And Peter, man.
Thanks for having me, Talin. Yeah, it's been a great
That's awesome. First engineer on the stream.
I love it.
Stamped in the book. All right, man. Thanks, everybody.
Right,
We'll catch you next week. See ya.